Okay, are you ready to our discussion today?
Well, as ready as I'm going to be.
All right, let's do it. We keep trying. We started a couple of weeks ago, and now we're going to continue. So we said basically there's a three types of the laws we have in Judaism. One is comes straight from the Torah.
Before we continue, I'm just curious, does anybody actually watch these videos or no?
It looks like a lot of people do. Sometimes 30 people, sometimes 20 people, sometimes 5, sometimes 40 even, and so. And sometimes people send feedback, and sometimes they don't. So it's a good question. I mean, I don't know exact statistics on that.
Okay.
All right, so we'll continue with that. So obviously, we didn't draw too many people interested in the subject because we already the second time we mentioned the people should come in with an example. So the first set of laws is where it's a Torah law. It's very clear. I mean, thou shalt not kill doesn't need much of the explanation. I mean, even that has explanations in the Torah, in the Gemara, but basically it's pretty straightforward. Then the next types of laws is where it's not explicitly mentioned in the Torah, but rabbis derived it. Like, for example, the laws of sacrifices in Zivachim, not explicitly saying that this particular procedure where the sacrifice for Kiddushim is done on the north side of the temple, or on the south side of the temple, and then they extended it also for different types of sacrifices. There are derivations, and they use a good logic of the Torah to link it. And then the third type of laws don't have any basis in the Torah or in derivations in the Chumash or in the Tanakh, but they basically decrees that rabbis felt is to put a fence around the Torah. And the example, for example, I just came up with an example today. Yesterday I was learning in the Masechta Pesachim that there was a law during the King Solomon days. There was a law of clean hands. So Kohanim had to wash hands. If they didn't wash hands, then they couldn't handle Kaddashim, holy sacrifices. And then later on, they're the famous, like here's my comment to my Gemara said, this is the decree, the famous 18 decrees after Shema and Hillel, close to millennium later, imposed a tumah on utensils that touched the beverages of the Rishon category. Rabbi Akiva could not attribute the tahor status to the knife, to the leniency according to Rabbinical tumah in a temple. So the rabbis came up and just basically said, listen, this is what we're going to do, because if we don't do it, people can be very a little bit frivolous with certain laws and they will forget it, and therefore we'll put some stringency. So once they impose these rules, it became the rule. And of course, it's a common perception or feeling, well, if I violated this command, well, don't worry about it. It's only rabbinical. It's not so serious. It's not in the Torah. That's commonly people excuse violation of the non-Torah prohibitions. But in fact, they're all serious. They're all valid. They all have to be abided by. But not all of them were derived or given by the Torah. Some of them, I just mentioned one, and there's a more, that basically rabbis sat down and said, listen, we have Cossacks coming to town and massacring people, and they usually come on Tuesday. So in this town on Tuesday, the law is nobody comes out from the home, they stay put and hiding in your basements. Okay, that's a law. The Torah doesn't say anything like that, but they come up with some rules and regulations because the life dictated that. So that's my introductory point to this law. And I got some comments. I have quite a few comments on that in our first recording. Some people will with indignation say, oh, wait a minute, are you implying rabbis just frivolously make things up like that? No, I'm not implying that. They didn't do it frivolously. They did it with a lot of considerations. A lot of very wise, smart people, our sages, thought about it. And when they came with certain rules, they felt it's necessary. But in all fairness to the truth, not all our laws coming from the Torah. Some of them were humanly made. Rabbis, with all respect to the rabbis, they made it, and nothing wrong with that. But sometimes people either dispute that, saying, well, no, it's all derived, it's all given to Moshe from a Sinai. They all knew that
Yeah.
don't go. And some people say, well, because why should I do it? Rabbis just came up with that stuff. I'm not going to go by that. It's all rabbinical stuff. So the two extremes of opinion. One, we just don't believe anything Rabbi is saying. Another extreme is, no, rabbis didn't say anything on their own volition. It all came out strictly derived in one way or another from the Torah or from other holy scriptures. The truth is actually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, well, so the whole problem is that people who are, hardline from get very upset if you discuss these kind of things. It's the hard line is to believe that everything that the sages decided is absolutely correct. There's never a mistake. It's all perfect. And they look upon it almost like it's a blemish on your neshama if you question it, and I understand it.
But the point is, it's not we're questioning it. We do say it's not. We're not questioning. We're not saying the rabbis are just, drank
Just making things up. Yeah.
We're not saying that. It's all nice. It's all valid, and it's applicable. But all we're saying is not everything rabbis. Technically speaking, not everything rabbis presented comes through the strict derivation from Torah or from a Sinai. Certain things rabbi just came, they sat together, the Rabbinical Council, and said, in whatever year, this is what we're gonna do, and this is what, and this is why. And nothing wrong with that. We respect that. We don't say we don't respect it.
What's an example of something that has no rabbinic and no Torah basis at all?
I just made an example. In the washing of the hands, the utensils.
Washing the hands, right?
Yeah, washing the hands is coming in. That was coming in King Solomon days. That contamination shouldn't happen. And then later on, as extended, there was very famous, it's called 18 rules. How exactly it's called?
So basically,
18 enactments.
but couldn't you say that like washing the hands is you could have tumah in your hands. You want to wash,
Yeah, but the Torah does not require that.
Right. It's actually you go a fence around the Torah,
That's a fence around the Torah. It makes sense. Like, for example, we'll give you a practical example. Many people put little, especially in the US, they put little plastic covers on the light switches, right? On Shabbat.
Yeah.
Torah doesn't require us to put plastic covers on the light switches.
Right, that's a fence. It's right. It's to prevent accidentally switching lights on.
And I have to say,
Makes
occasionally
sense.
by mistake, I turned it off. I made a mistake when I didn't have a switch. And if I have a switch, it will help me to not mistake.
Yeah.
Should I be more conscientious, more aware of this? Yes, I should, but I'm a human being, imperfect, and I do it. So here's a practical example. Torah doesn't require that, but we'll say, listen, that's a good idea. Nobody would argue that's a bad idea. If somebody has such a good attention span and ability to go by it and not flip the switch, like, he is a very outstanding individual, more power to him. But for me, it helps me. If I just accidentally do it, I just want it to happen. And that's even not a particular rabbinical enactment. You shall put plastic covers on your light switches on Shabbat. But it's just simply the habit, the rules that came about. And
it's not even required. It's a minhag, where it's we call it a chumrah.
Right. It's not exactly to my point. It's not like rabbis came with that. It's not a perfect illustration, but I just came up with this to say certain things that we do that right things to do, put a fence around Torah. came up also by rabbinical enactments. Not all of them necessarily. Now, what percentage of that? I have no idea. If I'll make a wild guess, I would say that probably 90% of rabbinical enactments come from derivation from the Torah. Therefore, it has based on the Torah. Maybe smaller than 10%, perhaps, I'm just guessing, who came up not on that derivation, but just simply sitting down in year 1239 or minus 1239 and said, this will be the rule. That's how we can do it. Shechting this animal. You're going to hold it by this leg or not by that leg, because otherwise he kicks, and you can't cut him, shechter properly. So the Kohen supposed to hold him by the left leg or not by the right leg. So they came up, I mean, I'm just making it up. Those things were made, and people get upset that you're discussing it. I don't think to me, nothing wrong with discussing it. We're not questioning this. We're simply asking the reality, the truth. Are there laws in our religion that are derived by rabbi without necessarily direct derivation from Zevachim or Shabbos or something else? Some are.
Oh, yeah, well, I think like washing Nagelwasser in the morning, that's a whole big deal, I mean, the Rebbe, I just saw somebody asked the Rebbe, what will be like after Mashiach comes? And he said, well, right now you can just kind of do anything you want, He says, but after Mashiach comes, for example, if you don't wash Nagelwasser in the morning, you won't be able to move your arms.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's important. He considers that a very important thing.
Hi, Endo.
How's it going?
Hi, Mendy.
Should we briefly repeat our conversation to Mandy in like 2 minutes? Should I summarize it?
Yeah.
All right, let me
We're
summarize
discussing,
it. Since you get 50 demerits for running a little bit late to our lesson, we're gonna forgive you and just say we continue discussing the topic of laws, and basically we said that in our religion, in our tradition, there's a 3 sets of laws. One, maybe more, but I can think of 3. One set of laws is direct commandments from the Torah. Very clear. It almost doesn't need much commentaries. That's it. The second set of laws, Torah doesn't say, but explicitly you can derive it, and our sages derive that if, for example, in Zevahim, this particular korban is down on the right-hand side of the altar, then that side of the korban also should be on the right side of the altar, and they show very good basis, solid derivation, and the basic logic on Torah, on Kings, on Kabbalah, whatnot, and they derive ultimately this is what you do. And a third set of laws, and Ruben and I are just discussing, that's probably a small fraction of all our laws. But third, the rabbis, in their wisdom, with all great respect to them, they came up with these laws, not arbitrarily necessarily, by the need of the time. They sat down and said, listen, Torah doesn't say it doesn't have to be derived, but in this day and age, this is what you do. And there are a couple of examples. One example I came up with, I was just learning the other day, I mentioned to Ruben in Pesachim, Amud 19b, it says, in King Solomon's days, there was a mitzvah to wash the hands. Kohanim have to wash the hands, otherwise they'll be tamei. And then eventually, 1,000 years later, by very famous 18 enactments, so-called, it was extended not only from the hands, but also for the vessels. And that did not have a derivation that in Kings, that says, and Chronicles, it said that therefore we do. So certain laws we do. And I make a simplistic example. Sometimes rabbis perhaps said, on Tuesday, Cossacks coming to this Polish village, and because of that, it's dangerous. So on Tuesday, nobody should come out from their house. That's just what we do. That has no derivation, no basis in Torah, but it made a lot of sense. So all these 3 categories we revere, we respect, and we try to abide by. But we have to be honest to say there's some portion of our laws that don't have a basis in Torah or Mount Sinai. But they have a good basis, and we respect that. So people tend to sometimes, as Ruben says, go to one of the 2 extremes. is to say, oh, as long as we mention that you're criticizing our rabbis, it's not true. It's all coming from the Torah. It all comes so nice. You just don't know how it's going on. That's it. That's one extreme on the right. On the left side, people will say, I don't care for this law. Rabbis just came in with the stuff. What does the Torah say that you shouldn't brush your teeth on Saturday? Does it say that? No, so don't give us this baloney. So both extremes, I think, is counterproductive. Reality is we have to acknowledge that some laws, and I'm guessing, not knowing, that a small fraction, but those laws came up with the wisdom of rabbis at the need of time, thousands of years sometimes after Sinai said, we're adding this law because it's to put a fence around the Torah so that if Lev Nelik is going to make a mistake, we're going to do something like if you have to come out of the city for 2,000 amos, we'll say don't come out of the city for 1,000 amos. Why not 1,500 or 1,200? I don't know. 1,000 likes a good number. Maybe somewhere in the Torah, yes, does mention 1,000 amos. So that's a good number to use. But basically, if I happen to be playing soccer with my grandkids and I kick the ball 1,005 amos, oh, I'm now in violation. So I'm not in violation because I still go to 1,000. So it's a fence around Torah to make people who are not necessarily that much with a program, that's not conscientious, not walking around all day long with the Talmud on their hands and just completely engrossed. Some people not that thorough about it. So Rabbi said, in order to help a common folk, we come up with some laws that will help them not to violate the Torah. And I brought one example. Last time in the tape, I presented another couple of examples, and that's basically what we discussed. So that's what Ruben and I just kicked around. I just really finished that before you just logged in. So please, if you have comments, questions, go ahead. Shoot right in.
What do I know? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I really don't know what to say to that. It's either accept them or you don't. I mean, it's to make any changes or any new laws, you have to really know the whole Torah.
Well, if we agree, that's already good progress. But the next step, because we're diligent students of the Torah, we're not fanatics. We always like to understand exactly in the middle of the Torah, the famous two words when Moshe was inquiring diligently, you shall ask, from where our rabbis say, you shall always question. You're not that you're questioning cynically. I don't believe that stuff. But you should rather say, if Torah says it, why does it say it? So we should be able to come up with an example. And for a couple of weeks, we couldn't come up with an example. And some of the comments I get in emails, nobody came up with an example of the first, second, and third category. I just gave example of the third category. There's many more categories. I mean, there's more examples.
There are, I don't know. I don't even know where to start with this really, but there are things like, for example, in every generation, there's different mitzvahs that are applicable to that generation that the rabbis kind of instituted. For example, before the Jews went to cross the Yarden, before they went into Israel, Moshe said that they have to start saying Shema twice a day. And then later on, Shabbos candles were added, and different points in the Jewish history, like different mitzvahs were starting to pray 3 times a day, and then Shacharis and Mincha and Shemona Esrei. There was a lot of things that were slowly added until they were, okay, so the question is where they came from. And you were saying before, the first example you gave of your 3 categories you made, that the extremist one to the right is anyone who says that everything ultimately has a source in Torah. I don't know if you want to explain like extreme, but I think all of these have a source, and the rabbis don't just make things up, and they need a place where from where it comes from. They need a source. They can't just make things up.
Well, I just gave you an example of the washing of the hands and the vessels does not have the source. That's in
sure
19b.
I'm saying, look, so you're saying it's extreme, but I'm saying I'm sure there is a source. And we
if you're sure there's a source, we need to show that. Where is that source? So far, we could
find it, right? So we would need to find it. So until we know where it is, we would say, I don't know yet where the source is. But
no, we know.
Gemara, until I prove it otherwise.
No. Menachem Mendel, Gemara says they're very explicitly. If you go through the Shas, you'll see that the laws were made without reference. And it stated that laws came out by the Rabbinical Council without necessarily having, they're asking, does it come from Moshe Sinai? No. Why did he do it? Because this is what we decided to do. Hillel, for example, Hillel changed the, what do you call it, a principal bill. Hillel didn't do a principal bill on the basic of the Mount Sinai. He did because the commerce was stopping. So he found a way to move over the depth across the Shemitah, across the, like this. Hillel came out because it was necessity of the times. It doesn't say, Moses didn't tell him to do that.
But it's still within the precepts of the Torah. It's not like he just pulled it out of thin air and made up like every Tuesday you have to wear a green scarf on your head.
He didn't pull it on the, but he said,
right.
It's a good idea to do it. He said, I have no sources for that, but it makes sense to me, not to Moses, that if we don't do it, commerce will stop. And Gemara acknowledges that's what Hillel made it up. And when I say made it up, it's not in a bad way, like he came up with something that is silly. It's a good idea, but he came up with the wisdom of Yehuda HaNassi decided to put the Mishnah to writing, even though we're not supposed to do it. He decided that it's good. But they did it out of the wisdom, but not because somewhere they can trace it. And in Zalachim chapter 5 and such, they equate this formula from Mizbeach that was built in the desert, and from that, therefore, we can apply the logic. There's certain laws that don't have that basis. And if we say, I don't believe that, we have to show the proof one way or the other.
I think there's a fine line between like making up and kind of configuring something in a way that still fits within the laws that already exist. Like, for example, someone can create a new programming language, but they didn't make up programming. It's still based on binary code. So if he created Prusbul, which is something, it was a new concept in the time, but it's still based on the foundation within of Torah. It doesn't contradict things, that it's still within the laws and it still works and still goes together.
By all means, it doesn't. I tell you, Reuben is a doctor.
I think it's different.
I tell you, Reuben is a doctor. If he decides and he went to school to study very specific laws, how to do operations, whatnot, if he decides tomorrow, the law, everybody comes to my office have to take their shoes off, because the shoes that a soldier's working where he's working, they may be dirty, and he brings dirt and bacteria to his office. That's a law. Well, he made this law because he's a doctor. It makes sense. He doesn't want a bacteria infection in his office. But basically, he made a decision without that being written in any particular book. You have to take your shoes off when you go see the doctor.
How about he has to wear a mask on his face when he goes into the doctor?
Well, the mask in the face, I'm not sure. I would say mask in the face probably is a result of a long tradition of doing that during the surgeries. But if he comes up tomorrow with taking his shoes off in his office, he probably one of the few people that do it, and other people don't. And if I go to his office for inspection, I will take my shoes off. And I'll say, Reuven insists to take the shoes off. He's a doctor, and I do what doctor says. Reuven, did you read that in your college? No, I didn't. But I am conservative doctor, and I want to do everything possible to do it. And lately, I have soldiers coming around to my office with a dirty boots, and they have some problems. So no longer boots in my office. I think that's analogy that rabbis did in the Torah. They found over the times there's certain things that are problematic, and they say, also, we have to put the laws to fence around the Torah.
From a Hasidic perspective, there's a whole nother element to this, which I think is just, it hasn't been mentioned here, which I want to kind of like bring in. And that is kind of going back to the root of what is the purpose, or what's the purpose of creation, and the element of struggle between impulsive action versus premeditated action. And this is the whole Tanya discussing the difference between your animal instincts pushing you impulsive action to do things, and versus your mind dictating to you every single action and every single detail that you do of your life. And it's kind of like an exercise, or it's a meditation, whatever you want to call it. Every single moment of the day, are you consciously aware of every action you're doing, or are you just doing actions the way you feel like it, the way you just by rote, just subconsciously just doing things? Now, the thing about this is that most things we do during the day are not connected, seemingly not connected to Torah or not connected to mitzvahs. So how can we do even those things consciously? Like you're getting dressed in the morning. So okay, you need to wear clothes in order to stay warm or whatever else it is. But how you get dressed, why should anyone care? Well, how would someone get dressed from a conscious perspective as opposed to subconsciously? So you need some kind of like methodical way to get dressed or premeditated way to get dressed in order for your mind to be dictating you how to get dressed instead of being getting dressed in a very impulsive way. Today I feel like putting my shirt on first and my left sleeve in first and then do start my bottom buttons and go up, and tomorrow I feel like putting my pants on first. Every day you're going to do something differently, whatever you feel like doing, or you just do it subconsciously and you have no idea what you do. Torah comes along and it says, well, if you want to do something the way things work according to Torah, well, the right always has the precedence over the left. So you always start with the right. And the top part of your body is more important than the bottom part of your body. So you get dressed the top part of your body before the bottom. And when you want to give respect to something, you give respect to the right, then the left, and then you give the left and the right. And therefore you have a whole way in which to, Kabbalistically speaking, in a way of the way the world works with giving respect to certain things over other things, there's a whole way in which to get dressed. Does Hashem care? No, or yes, or however you want to look at that, it's irrelevant. Is it a mitzvah to get dressed that way? No, but if someone wants to be able to become fully in control of themselves and not do things impulsively, then they have to be in control even with mundane things that aren't necessarily connected to mitzvahs, and part of that includes getting dressed. So therefore the Torah has a way to get dressed. Put your right sleeve on first, then your left sleeve, and then your right shoe, then your left shoe, then your left shoes, and right. And that way you have a way, according to Torah, that even while you're getting dressed, you're still connecting to Hashem. You're still Hashem wants. And I give an example for this.
I can say something interesting, which is that some studies have found they only have so many hours a day in which you can do cognitive thinking. Like if you have to keep making decisions all day long, at some point your decision-making battery wears down and it's hard to make decisions. So the reality is the more you can routinize things and not have to think about them, it actually frees up your brain for more inventive, creative,
makes your life simpler, yes.
So I know it's like the story I tell is like Steve Jobs always ordered the exact same dinner whenever he went to a restaurant. And somebody asked him why. He said, because every time I have to sit and decide and choose a menu, I'm using up brain energy that I really want to save for important stuff. And he just ordered, I don't know, he probably just always ordered steak and potatoes. Or,
they probably know him. He says, I'll have the usual.
It seems why a lot of people wear the same clothes every day.
Of having a routine, like in the morning, for simple things like getting dressed, is it takes it out of the area of analyzing and thinking, what am I going to do next? What I'm going to do. And also, if you wear the similar clothes every day, the Lubavitch uniform, white shirt, black pants, and black suit or black hat, that also simplifies life. It's
right.
Sure.
Part of it. Part of why they do it.
Less choices, and now your brain's really free to just focus on the important stuff.
I think, guys, both of those examples are great. I think Menachem Mendel just illustrated excellent example of the second layer, second category of, because Tanya, as we just brought out, why right versus left, is basically based on Kabbalah. It's based not only on Ari, but also all the way back to Shimon ben Yochai. And Kabbalah clearly prefers the right side. I mean, it prefers even Abraham with a Hesed is preferring to Gevurah, and the whole discussion in Zohar about right versus left. So the basis of we're doing right versus left, as Tanya, as we just mentioned, implements, has a very direct source in the holy writings, in this case in Kabbalah, which is part of our tradition, part of our religion, part of our holy writing. So that is the rule. Why do you do it right and not left? It's not arbitrarily. It's because 20 rabbis sat together, scratched their head and say, guys, let's do it right because it makes sense. There was a specific reference in Kabbalah later on in Tanya, and that was implemented. So that's not rabbinical decision out of thin air. That's based on a very solid sources. The example I was bringing up, I'm not in that category. The example I was bringing up that there's no Kabbalistic source or Mishnaitic source or coming from a Sinai or coming from Tanakh somewhere. It is coming from the rabbis sitting in somewhere in Moscow in 1723 and saying, because we don't have enough potatoes in the field, then on Shabbat, you're going to have 3 potatoes and during the week, only 1. And that became the rule because it just made sense. They had to make some rules in order to survive. And as I said, I'm repeating myself, how many of the rules in our religion are based on that type of decision? Probably not many, but there are some. So we can't deny that everything comes from the Torah. It's in the spirit of the Torah. Rabbi is saying also, 3 potatoes is within the spirit of the Torah. But Torah doesn't say you should eat 3 potatoes in Poland, in Warsaw only 2.
So there's 2 other things to add over here. One of them is called hashkafa. You have halacha and you have hashkafa, and then you also have a minhag. So, there's a lot of minhagim that people do that definitely not halacha. And the thing is, where the source them? Where do they start from? You have something called hashkafa, which is the people, it's not necessarily a minhag, but people like to be more strict, or they do things in a very particular kind of way. And the question is, why do they do it in that particular kind of way? Is it right or is it wrong? No, it's not right or wrong. But for that particular family or that particular kind of sect of Hasidism, whatever it is,
and that's a perfect example. For example, like eating rice for Sephardi or not eating rice for Ashkenazi has nothing to do with the Torah, nothing to do with it has to do that in the Northern Europe, when it's cold, the fields, the way it was sown, were very possible. Then the crops you bring from the field could have a remnants of rice in the vehicles that go with the wheat. In the Sephardi, Northern Africa, it wasn't the case. And that came in historically. The Torah itself doesn't say, in Algeria, you can use rice, but in Poland, you shouldn't.
But once it's become, but even in halacha, you have things like this, which are tradition, like even things that are kosher. Some things are kosher. Some animals are kosher, but we don't eat them because we don't have a masorah that this is something that we eat. For example, a giraffe. Some people say the reason why we don't eat giraffe is because we don't know where to shecht its neck. We do know where to shecht its neck. The thing is that there's no passed down tradition that giraffes were eaten, even though they have all the signs of being a kosher animal, and Jewish people have, so therefore we don't eat it. So then we have a question like a turkey. Why do we eat turkeys? It was only recently discovered that turkeys only came from America. We didn't have them recently. And we know in Hebrew it's called...
But that is also, I will just add to this is also not in the category number 3, but in category number 2. Because this is not that somebody just simply decided, ostriches will have this rule. The reason, or the example you just made, was a doubt. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. And a doubt is still based on the Torah. Torah specifies kosher and non-kosher. And when we're not sure, then at least what basis is Torah. We're just simply not sure. It's not the same as the people what came up with an animal on Mars. And they never know what Torah says about animals on Mars and say, well, since I don't know what it is, this animal, let me examine him, let's not eat it.
So what I'm saying over here is that even these things like washing hands, that example you gave before, I'm sure that there are Kabbalistic sources for them as well, and why they do it. And I'm sure there's a source why they came up for it. Even if in the Gemara it says one thing, everything has a Peshat, Remez, Drush, Sod, and Hasid. Everything has all these different levels of it, the simple explanation, but there are plenty explanations given as to.
But I cannot say I'm sure, because if we know, we look. You cannot be sure. You think so, but you don't know. Maybe there is no source.
The reason why I'm saying I'm sure is because that's the way the Torah is structured. That such a thing exists. If something is on the level of pshat, there's also a remez and a drush and a sod. Even if I don't know,
we need, but we need to find the proof.
We need to find it. Okay.
But we don't have a proof, and the absence of proof, we cannot take one opinion versus another.
It's the way it's created. It's like a computer has a battery in it. I can say the computer doesn't have a battery in it because I've never seen it. But so it's the way the Torah is structured. It has a structure to it. So even if it says one thing here and something else over there, there's still a structure. You just have to be able to know.
No. That's not a good. I have to be argumentative, but computers, we all know there's a battery, because if I want to find out, I can go to YouTube. If I didn't take a computer myself apart, which I did a little bit, right? You can find out the people showing the battery. So we know there's a battery. That's not a doubt. I don't know the battery.
I've never
But-
seen it. I've never seen the
But
battery
you,
on my
you never
computer. I
seen
don't
it,
know.
but I think you have to admit there is a battery. I don't have a doubt about it, right?
I believe it's in there. I believe it's there. I haven't seen it yet, so
Yeah,
I
but
don't know.
do you think there's element of doubt that maybe there's no battery? Is it in your mind? Do you really personally doubt there may not be the battery?
I haven't seen it yet.
No, I'm
Exactly.
not
This
saying
is
have you seen it or
exactly my
not.
point.
The question is, do you think there's a battery or not? Do you not? Are you not sure? So yes, yeah, you haven't seen it, but
I don't know. Anything's possible.
it's possible there's no battery in the computer.
Sure. It's plugged in. Maybe it just works because it's plugged in.
How do I know you have a Torah in your house? I never. I mean, I saw it because I went to
Exactly.
dinner.
Exactly. We
Well,
don't know.
Well, you.
We don't know. So we
how-
say we don't know.
How do
We
you?
say we don't know.
Do
We
you
don't say we
know?
know.
Do you
We
know
don't
that the moon rotates around the sun?
This is a no, we don't. Well, it depends how
sure.
you ask, how you look at it, because there are many models of how it can work, and they can both be right. They can all be right. It depends how you measure it.
It's possible the Earth rotates around the moon.
It's yes, it's possible. You can calculate the whole solar system.
I
That
rest my
the
case. I have
moon is the
no, I
center
have
of the
no
whole
further
solar
questions,
system.
my honor.
Huh?
I have no further questions, Your Honor. If you
You
think
can
that it's possible
calculate it.
sun rotates around, I mean, if you
It-
say
you
that
can calculate
basically our sages came to the point, then they use rotation in a figurative sense. Because if I'm looking from my window right now, from the zodiac sign, I can see how the constellations move, and it appears that the whole universe is rotating
Well,
around me. But in
well,
reality, we know that the moon rotates around the Earth.
Okay, so in mathematics, you have the double, what's it called? I forgot what this is called. When you have two spheres moving around each other in an infinite space, the three-body problem. What's it called? The two-body problem, three-body problem. If you have two, what's it called?
Three-body problem,
Three-body problem.
it's trying to calculate gravitational forces. Two bodies is not hard, but three bodies becomes insanely complicated.
So the way they've done it is that, look, put a point here, put a point here, put a point here, and now you can calculate it. But that's not really, you might, if you're going to put the point here and point, you might come up with a slightly different answer if they're moving at different speeds. So basically, the planets, the Earth, are in an infinite amount of space. We have no idea how big the universe is. So it's really impossible to know 100% what's really the center of the universe. So if you're going to be based on, wait a second. Wait a second, we have 2 minutes left. If you're going to be basing this on the concept of relativity, what you should be doing, which is how everything works, is relative to us on Earth, everything else revolves around us. You can make a model on a computer. You could do it. There's ways to calculate it. That you could put the moon as the center of the universe, and you can calculate how everything moves around the moon. You can make the sun. You can make the Mars. You can make Jupiter. You can make Pluto. You can make an asteroid the center of the universe, and make a whole model how everything revolves around it.
Okay.
So it makes sense, according to gravity, maybe according to Galileo or whatever, that probably the sun. It makes most sense because of the way things work, and we see other structures. It makes most sense that we probably go around the sun, but you can calculate it. And you'll just be different calculations, and everything goes around the Earth. So according to Torah, we're saying the Torah, the Earth is the center of creation. Calculate it in a way that the Earth is the center of creation, and calculate it that way. Why you have to calculate that the sun's the center of creation?
Okay.
You can.
Okay.
That's
I
it.
like
That's
that.
a Torah perspective.
I like that. I think I like that the whole thing rotates around the moon. That's good.
Go for it.
No, what different? It's not going to change my life. I tell you, it's not going to change. I'm not going to go to the moon tomorrow because I just learned that everything spins around it. I still go to a bike ride with Rob next week. This is great discussion, guys. We only have like 50 seconds. This is wonderful. We actually got a little bit debate, which is fine. Please don't take offense if I was a little bit maybe not. It's not disagree. In the end, I agree with your position. I like your position better than mine. I do. I understand that the multiple is free body, but
what did you say that was offensive? I missed it.
No, because I was implying you don't have a proof, and that could be taken offense. Oh, you don't have a proof. I don't have to come a proof. And then you come up with a very good model with a moon being the center of the universe. I like that model. Guys, we only have 20 seconds for the next time. Any particular topic you want to talk next Tuesday? We have 10 seconds.
Well, we can find somebody to talk about some of the sages that we've discussed,
Okay, like a history, like we did Rambam and Rashi. Okay.
Yeah.